I grew up in a household where there was my mum, my stepdad, so my parents separated when I was quite young, and it was just the three of us and a couple of dogs. And it was a home that there was love some days, but predominantly there was a lot of heartache and upset and frustration, and to be honest, a lot of violence. So there was a lot of volatility, and it was really hard growing up under those circumstances. I definitely, at that point in time, didn't see God in what was happening. And I remember feeling so confused and frustrated as a child, because I was like, well, if there's a God, where is he? Like, why is he letting these things happen to my mummy? So there was kind of, I suppose, a build-up that led to us leaving. There had been increasing arguments, and after 12 years, there had been increasing tension, to the point where my mum bravely had said that she'd really had enough and didn't want to be in that environment anymore, and kind of questioned or pushed back on her abuser as my stepfather. That resulted in us being kicked out, and we fled that night, went to our local Macca's, had a dinner, rang my dad, who travelled down. He lived on the coast, picked us up and brought us back to his house where we lived, and we stayed there until we found a place here on the coast. So I think somewhere over the course of that marriage breakdown, that I became more reliant on God and actually recognised how much I needed him. It would have been one of the first Sundays that we were in our own home, where I said to my mum that I really wanted to go to church, and I don't really know why. I mean, I do know why. God had a very big role in that, but I think at that time I just had this really strong feeling that I needed to be around God's people, and my grandparents had been coming to this church for a very long time, so it made sense to come here and find out more. I think God's shown me that he doesn't forsake those that he loves, and that he always has a plan, even if it involves something that isn't overly clear, if it involves a lot of pain and suffering, that he is there with us. And even though, it may not be a physical hug, he is helping us get through. And I think back on all those nights when I was by myself, and, the comfort that I found in my grandparents, like God was working through them to comfort me. And it's just so encouraging to know that he is there, that he put so many people around me, like my scripture teachers and my uncles, to make sure that I knew who he was and knew how much he loved me. When I was a scared little girl, I couldn't see any of that. But yeah, God is so good, and he enabled me years on to be able to forgive my stepfather for all that he had done, and that's something that I wouldn't have been able to do through my own strength. That's purely and 100% God. So part of it is remembering that God has extended me grace, and so I have to extend that grace to myself as well, and forgive myself for the things that I haven't done. And there's also a part where I am continually even more so reliant upon him, because I can see how faithful he's been to me, not only in maintaining and fulfilling his promises in that he won't forsake me, but also just knowing that he's there, like when there is no one else, when I am by myself at home, or in those situations where I was in that dark little room by myself, he was there and he was comforting me and he was loving me from afar. And that's the greatest joy that I could ever know in my life. And then that's what keeps me going. So when things are really hard now, I keep reminding myself, and I think back to that little Sarah, and I'm like, no, he hasn't forsaken you. He didn't leave you during those times. He's definitely not going to leave you now.